Okay, so Assalamu alaikum and good morning to Majfred because it's morning there, very early morning, but good afternoon to everyone else who have just joined in. Thank you very much for taking time out to join this session. This is going to be a webinar featuring the visionaries and the co-founders behind this app called Sitch. What it is and what it's all about. Both these gentlemen would be sharing that information with you in a very short time. But so I am Uzair Shahid and I'll be your host for today. Before we diving into the discussions ahead, a quick reminder to please keep your microphones muted. Although I have muted them, but whenever you have any questions, you want to ask any question, just put it in the chat window. We will be actively looking at the questions and we'll be answering that at the end of the session. So we want to ensure that everyone has the best possible experience today during this session. So without further ado, I'm thrilled to introduce our two esteemed speakers, Mr. Majfred Memetaj and Mr. Daniyal Tahir. I will not delve into introducing the app or introducing them because I think they'll do a better job at that rather than me. But I think let's welcome them and the virtual stage is all yours and we're eager to hear more about you, the journey, the philosophy, and the incredible features this app has. But most importantly, I think your journey to launch this app with zero funding is something that has excited a lot of my audience here, and I think they would want to learn more about that particular point, that how can these aspiring entrepreneurs can kickstart their entrepreneurial journey. So I think it's all yours now. Over to you guys.
All right, thank you very much for that intro. So hello everyone and welcome. My name is Majfred Memetaj. I'm the CEO of Sitch. This is a new social networking app. And hosting this webinar with me is my co-founder and CTO, Daniyal Tahir. Now, a bit of background. We had the idea for this app in late 2019. And since we had no funding, we had to start saving money from our jobs in order to bootstrap this project. While saving up money, we also started to learn the skills that we would need to build this app ourselves. And so it was 2 years ago that we started working on making this app a reality, and 2 months ago that we finally launched publicly. So we're here today to tell you about Sitch some more, talk about our journey overall, share some mistakes we made, and more importantly, the lessons we learned along the way. Now, a little caveat, while we're discussing today the consumer social app space, you can take many of these lessons and actually apply them to your ideas and your journeys. So let's dive in. We start first with identifying a problem. This is where everything begins. So think for yourselves, where do the best ideas come from? And Sitch started actually with a really simple question. We thought, why isn't there a convenient way for us to know how the people we care about are doing without having to ask them every single time? And so the best ideas solve a problem that many people have and that means something to the entrepreneur. So let's break this down a little bit, actually. First, ask yourselves, what are you solving for? Then, can you provide a solution to a problem that affects enough people? Now, this will help you determine if the market is actually large enough. And lastly, does it matter to you? This perhaps is the most important point because it's your commitment to the idea and making it a success that will help get you through difficult periods, of which there will be many. Now, when we asked ourselves this question, we were surprised why existing apps weren't actually accomplishing this. So let's try this thought experiment for a moment. Pick 5 people that you really care about. It can be any 5 people. What would it take for you to tell me right now how each of those people are feeling today? Are they all using the same social media apps, or do they prefer different ones? And even so, are they using the apps honestly, or are they always posting the best versions of their lives? So maybe these 5 people, you have them conveniently in one group chat, and you can just message them all at the same time and ask, but how long is it going to take for everybody to reply? Now, it's this that we wanted to solve for. And it led us to a larger realization about the market. And this is critical that you understand the space that you're going into and who you're targeting. So what we came to realize was that you used to be able to know more or less how people were doing because in the early days of social, they were originally social networks. And it's this distinction between these two terms, social networks and social media, that is vital to what we're doing. Because social media has now, for over the last decade, prioritized content over connections. And this is the root of its problems. Because social networks used to foster your connections, that was their primary purpose. So people, the users in our case, are getting tired of this. Why? Well, for starters, it's damaging to mental health. Many studies have shown this, and the pandemic made it even more pronounced. And social media can give us a false sense of connectivity. This follower following model paired with these expectations to publish only the best content to get the most likes from strangers can give us an impression of connection, but it's superficial. It's not real, it doesn't last. But this wasn't always the case, right, Daniel?
Right. Thanks for getting us started here, Majfred. As you pointed out, over the years, the line between social networking and social media has been blurred, as you can see from the graph on the screen. This graph has actually been taken from Google Trends, which is a useful tool you can look up like keywords and like historically how much they were searched on search engines. As you can see, around 2009, the term social media overtook the term social networking and has replaced it ever since. People now use the two terms interchangeably as if they're the same thing, but they're not. And this distinction is what we're trying to really educate people on. Back to you, Myfred.
All of this led us to coming up with a hypothesis about there being yet another shift in the consumer social apps, but this time back towards social networking principles. And over the last few years, we've been actually seeing this hypothesis come true. So this graph that you see, I made it plotting various apps along this scale, and it's not exactly to scale, but it helps visualize a point that we're trying to make. If you were to draw a line down the center of this graph, you'd see that there are older apps leaning on the left toward media and younger apps on the right leading networking. And this wasn't always the case, and it won't remain this way as apps can evolve over time and shift along this. However, seeing so many newer apps and then newer ones even to come that are putting connections and community building over addictive content was very validating to us. It told us that we were on the right track. Now, before you can get started on making your idea a reality, it's really important that you understand the challenges you're likely to face.
Right. So let's talk about those challenges. Obviously, every market has its own unique sets of challenges, and today we'll only be talking about the challenges of the social media space, but some of these will be applicable to the market you choose to target as well. Firstly, in the social app space, barriers to entry are really low because apps can be published for little to no cost. While this is a good thing, what this means is it is very difficult to stand out because the market is very saturated. You have to have something that truly differentiates your product from the hundreds of competitors out there. The ideal goal of a social media app is to achieve network effects. What this means is users forming connections with other people in their networks using your app. This not only increases retention, but also allows for organic growth, as users will do the marketing for you by sharing with their friends and family. However, network effects are very difficult to achieve. One reason for this is that users can be reluctant to switch from apps that they're already used to. Another reason apps fail in the social space is that it is hard to get off the ground. This is because users find little value in your app until they have at least added a few other connections. So, in other words, network effects are hard to achieve, and longer lasting users are hard to acquire. But once you acquire these users, they're the ones that are going to use your app regularly and over long periods of time. Another major challenge was that we personally faced in the social space is the fact that we had to recondition users. People have become so used to the social media model of addictive algorithms, followers, and likes. So apps like Sitch, which deliver true authentic connection, just don't seem as exciting. This is the mindset we are trying to change here at Sitch. We want users to see the value in real personal connections instead of the superficial content they're used to seeing in social media apps. One more issue in the social space is how difficult it is to get funding due to the fierce competition. Like us, you can launch your app with little to no funding and have some organic growth. But long term, eventually, you will need to raise funds if you want to grow to the global scale. If you want to serve millions of users, you will require funds to run your servers and maintain your app. This is specifically a struggle for apps like Sitch, which are free. Without funding, you will have to take on a lot of responsibility yourself. You cannot stick to a defined role. You will have to step up and do whatever is required. I remember the long nights and weekends we have had to make such a reality. And this can lead to a lot of stress and tiredness. I don't mean to discourage you from this journey. I want you to really be prepared for it because it is going to be a tough one. So, those are some of the challenges we have faced in the consumer social space. Now, let's get back to the problem we are trying to solve here.
As you'll recall, we wanted a way to conveniently tell how all of our loved ones are doing, ideally at just a glance, but we needed to create an environment that allowed people to be genuine and not fall for the same issues that social media fosters. Let's jump into how Sitch actually does this. So Sitch was our solution to fill this void that we felt in the market. And we went back to basics, as we like to say, and prioritized connections, not content. You could also say that we picked out features to be kind of anti-social media because we didn't want to have their same faults. So overall, Sitch is a social networking app for those you care about most. And you can effortlessly keep each other informed on how you're feeling day to day. Now, sometimes just knowing this information can be enough to ease any worries you might have and help you feel more connected to the people close to you. And other times it helps to foster more meaningful conversations. Here's a bit on how it works. And it's super simple, and this is very much on purpose. We wanted to launch with a core feature that makes us unique, working perfectly, and figure out later what other features from a long list of ideas that we have that we want to implement, because that's best to do with user feedback. And so a Sitch is currently made up of 3 elements: your mood, which you can set as a 5-point color scale ranging from great to terrible; an emoji that can be used in many ways to either enhance your mood or perhaps relay what you're doing; and lastly, an optional text field in case you would like to elaborate some more. You can also set a location on your profile if you choose to do so. And that's it. It's that easy. So when it comes to adding the people closest to you, you can group them in circles that are unique to you. And there are no followers on Sitch, only mutual connections. But the circles are exclusive to you, meaning you can arrange people however you want. Now, remember a bit ago when I asked you to pick 5 people and tell me how long it would take you actually to find out how they're doing today? At best, maybe it takes you a few minutes if you were to check a few apps or wait to get replies from everyone. But with Sitch, all you have to do is open the app, and it's that convenient. But not only are you going to see how that group of 5 are doing, everyone else you love right there in one place. With this information being opted in by everyone, we're all better off knowing how the people we care about are doing. And seeing someone Sitch tends to start conversations in better ways than just the basic hello might.
All right, so here are some examples of how to use Sitch. I'll give you a few seconds to go over these texts. All right, so the first example shows a mother complaining to her child that they have not called or texted in a few days. I'm sure most of you have been in the situation where someone has complained that you haven't reached out for a while. This could be our parents, our friends, other family members. We know that everyone is busy and it can be tough to stay in touch with everyone daily. However, with Sitch, in just a few seconds, you can post an update which your loved ones can check at any time to know how you're doing today. The second case highlights another very interesting problem we have with social media. On social media, we only post when something good happens to us, like we have good news or we got a new job or something like that. But when we are feeling sick or we're feeling down or depressed, we rarely post to social media. This is a crucial part of Sitch. Sitch is a safe space where you can post an update regardless of whether you're feeling good or bad, because it is meant only for your closest people, like your closest friends and your closest family. So you do not have to worry about what your pupil will think if you post something negative. On to the next part of building a startup. Building your team. Building a good team is of the utmost importance. A co-founder or multiple co-founders are highly recommended. Not only does this improve the quality of your product, but also investors encourage solo founders to find partners. Your business partners are kind of like your work family. You will spend a lot of time with them. So make sure of two things. Firstly, that you like them. This is going to be a really, really tough journey if you don't. Secondly, make sure you complement each other's skills. It's not very helpful to have multiple partners who are experts at the same thing. A good team requires expertise across all areas. The business and tech combination, the CEO and CTO, is a very popular one. And that's what we are doing here, me and Majfred. I come from a technical background, and Majfred comes from a business and finance background. And especially for tech startups, the CTO position is very important because even if you're not developing or creating the product yourself, you need at least one of the partners to understand the product thoroughly. Right. So once you've built your team, we come to the next question. How do you actually build the product? Especially if you do not have a lot of funds available, how can you deliver the best product at low cost? So first off, your product is only going to be as good as the tools you use to create it. I recommend spending a lot of time in this part of your journey, finding the best tools for the job. Do a lot of research, spend a lot of time, because the tools you use will dictate how your product ends up being. Building doesn't have to be expensive if you find the right tool set. We live in the age of technology where there's so many free, amazing tools available online for you to use. So let's talk about tools for a social app like Sitch. Okay, whenever developing a mobile app, there's a few important decisions you have to make. Firstly, do you develop natively for both iOS and Android, or do you use a hybrid tool like React Native or Flutter? This depends on the complexity of your app. For Sitch, some of the elements we created and some of the elements we plan to create were too complex for React Native at the time, so we decided to go the native route. Also, Flutter, another option, wasn't as advanced as and well documented as it is today. I think if we were to start over, Flutter might be the correct choice because it has come a long way in the past few years. So the advantage of using a hybrid language, if it is possible for your app, is that you have a single code base instead of two. This makes development much faster, and your code is easier to maintain and delivers consistently across platforms. The advantage of native development, of course, is performance and the ability to have more complex features. But developing natively comes at a higher cost and also longer development time, since you have to develop and maintain two code bases instead of one. Another important decision for any app is where to host your backend. We decided to go with Firebase, which is an amazing backend service by Google, and it is free to use up until a certain scale. So until you reach hundreds of thousands of users, it's actually a backend server at no cost. And they have a huge library of supporting documentation and features, and they're very helpful if you reach out for, if you're running into any problems, like their team is available and ready to help out. So if you use your own backend server, obviously you can customize it a lot more and you have more control over it, but this can be costly, and also you are then responsible for backups, outages, downtime, etc. So using a service like Firebase or AWS actually allows you to focus more on your app and not worry about the server side of things. Just general advice, these days the development community online is so amazing. There's so many free resources online to learn literally anything you want, any programming language, any infrastructure, anything you can imagine really. These resources include free courses, development labs, YouTube videos, programming forums, and so much more. So I would strongly recommend you utilize these free resources as much as you can.
In addition to those resources, we also have a couple other tools that we use and are happy to recommend. Backlog is another great tool to leverage. Now, Backlog is great at tracking and assigning tasks. That could be anything from simple to-dos, some bugs, maintenance tickets, and so on. And it's really important that you use a project management tool, especially as your team and your workload grows, so that everything is completed on time and nothing is forgotten. Another one is Figma. This is an excellent app and web design tool that gives creatives all the features they need to model an entire app exactly as it would appear on your phone. In fact, the image you see here is an exploded version of all the screens from Sitch on Figma. And it has this really nice developer mode that lets your developers view all the key information they need to translate any of your designs directly into code. And Figma offers free plans that are unlimited to students. Lastly, Canva is a nice alternative to professional photo and vector editing tools that let you create really amazing graphics with incredible ease. I use it mostly for social images. In fact, if you saw any of the promos for this webinar, those are made on Canva, and they have a free plan open to anyone. In fact, most of the tools you might want allow you to use them for free with either limited numbers of users or limited features. So you don't really need to start paying for many things until you've grown as a business. Now, let's talk about a slightly more difficult topic and discuss the mistakes that we've made and what we would have done differently. Now, mistakes can make for an excellent teacher of lessons that are really hard to forget. So if you have a chance to learn from others' mistakes rather than making them yourselves, that would be nice. So one major mistake from us was trying to do too much at once, striving to release something perfect. KISS, or KISS, is an acronym that we try to keep top of mind whenever we're making decisions now. It stands for Keep It Stupidly Simple. You want to focus on the core features first and the most efficient version of the app in order to get it into users' hands to test. You have to let go of perfectionism, which was very difficult for us, and especially for me to do. You're putting something that you made in others' hands to judge. So it's natural you want that thing to be perfect, but the truth is it likely never will be. And user feedback is much more valuable than you can imagine. As you can see from the slides here, the one on the left is one of my earliest designs, and it's not that great. But after some practice, you eventually get to something like the one in the center. And had we launched with that, we probably would have gotten really useful information from users. Time and practice eventually gets you to the final result you see today, but what we're saying is it shouldn't hold back any progress. Keeping your product simple at first will allow you to move quickly, and speed is critical in order to do more with limited funds while still growing users. It's also another mistake that costs us time and money. If you're going to fail, it's best to do it quickly so that you have more time to recover. That's why we say if you must fail, fail fast. Just get it over with. There were certain features that we originally had planned for the first version of Sitch that we spent a lot of time working on, only to then have to remove them or completely remake them once we had actual alpha users tested out. As a startup and a relatively small team, you're probably also in the best position to move quickly. That's why you sometimes see startups making moves a lot faster than maybe larger profitable companies. It's because startups have operations that tend to be more efficient. You have fewer people making and approving decisions. Lastly, traction is the most impressive thing to investors, and we learned this the hard way. This is especially true coming from a position where neither co-founder has any prior success to show their capabilities, nor any connections to investors that can open doors. So the further along your startup is, the more likely you are to raise funds and the more leverage you're going to have, so you're not giving up more of your company for less money. Now, besides mistakes, we also have some more advice for you based on what we've learned on this fantastic journey so far. Starting with, great brands are driven by answering the question why first. So you should think of your messaging to people in order of answering questions why, how, what, not the other way around. For example, a company that does this really well is Apple. Doing it this way, delivering the purpose first, ends up convincing listeners along the way so that by the time you actually reveal your product to them, that what portion, they're more likely to think, well, yes, of course, that makes sense. We also recommend you focus on building and maintaining a lean startup. Now, there's a great book that you can read more about this topic on, but in general, you want to keep your overhead low, and this means a smaller team. You don't want to grow too quickly, only to then have to lay people off if you don't meet profit or funding goals. And another way to keep costs down is to have no offices, keep your operations all virtual, and that's getting much easier to do every single year as technology advances. A lean startup with limited resources can survive for longer without external funding. However, that's just based on costs that you can predict.
Right. And that's an important thing to remember. Not everything can be predicted, not everything is in your control. So try to focus on the things that actually are in your control. For example, markets can be very unpredictable, but a lean startup ensures the best chance of survival. You cannot control the market, but you can control your overheads and you can control the costs of running your company. If you need to raise funds eventually, the investment market fluctuates all the time. But by building a sustainable company that can grow organically, you have the best shot of raising funds when you need them. Even the demand for your product will change according to market conditions. For instance, although we came up with the idea for Sitch before the pandemic, the coronavirus pandemic basically accelerated the user's demand for deeper connections. So there's always an element of luck in life and in business, but make sure you do everything that is in your control. Touching again on the topic of learning online using free resources, remember that you don't necessarily have to have direct experience in the industry you are targeting. Knowledge and experience can be gained along the way. If you keep thinking, I don't have the skills to do this, change that by committing to learn those skills. For instance, although I had a background in scientific programming, I studied physics in university, I had never programmed a mobile app before. So while working a full-time job, I spent my evenings and weekends learning Kotlin, the language used in Android development. And this is what allowed me to develop the prototype for Sitch, which is the first step in making this project a reality. So one last time, when resources are limited and you don't have a bunch of funds available, you have to be prepared to do whatever is required for the business. Because it comes down to you and your co-founders. There is no one else who has a real stake in your success but you.
That's exactly right. And similarly, I've always had a hand for art. So I was able to translate my design skills to a new tool like Figma that let me wireframe and visually build out everything you see for the app. And another way to gain experience, the best way, in my opinion, in fact, is by doing. Like so many skills, you can read and learn about business and even entrepreneurship, but the best way to learn is by doing these things yourselves. And one way to do this with relatively low risk is something that I did for many years. After graduation, knowing that eventually I wanted to build something myself one day, but I lacked experience and money, I decided that working for startups exclusively would help me with both problems. See, working for startups typically means you're on a small team, so you're given a lot of responsibility from day one. It's a lot of learning. It also gives you the opportunity to watch and maybe even work really closely with other founders and seasoned entrepreneurs so that you can learn what works, but more importantly, what doesn't work. Basically, you'll get to learn from others' mistakes while getting paid to do so. Now, shifting gears a little bit, let's talk about what's actually coming next for Sitch and how you can get involved. So Sitch is driving towards what's called product market fit. As you can see from the chart here, a startup can be broken down into a few stages. And product market fit is the transition point of a startup entering its growth phase. And by now, it's proven that there is demand and it's likely raised the funding needed in order to reach more users and grow the team accordingly. But you can still maintain a lean startup and its principles even with funding. That'll make sure your runway lasts. So why are we talking to you students? Well, part of our strategy is we want to onboard communities as opposed to individual users due to the way that our app functions, which requires networks. And colleges are excellent launching pads actually for social apps because of the strong community presence. And since UCP is called the TikTok University of Pakistan, we know that the students here are up to date with the latest social media trends. Actually, here are some examples of social apps that started off with a strong presence on a campus. Snapchat got its start at Stanford. Reddit at the University of Virginia, which is known for its tech campus. Facebook famously launched at Harvard. And perhaps Sitch will be remembered for its impact at UCP. And one way you can get involved more directly is to participate in a brand ambassador program that will be launching after this webinar. It will be exclusive to UCP students, and more information will be emailed to you. But overall, it'll track your ability to refer the app to others and reward you based on various milestones. We also wanted to mention, in case anybody was wondering by now, we're not hiring actively at the moment, but top performers of this program will be kept in mind for future internships as well as other roles as they open up. And that was everything that we had prepared for you today. Thank you all very much for listening, and we're happy to answer some questions that you might have.
So that was a wonderful session. So I have a few questions. I think a few of the participants had sent me their questions. The first one is, what inspired you both to create Sitch, and how do you see it evolving in the future?
Yeah. Donnie, actually, do you want to tell a short version of the origin?
Sure, I can do that. So actually, the first image we saw in one of the slides, Mike, can you pull that up?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so this first one is actually not exactly what happened, but this is a problem. I once called Majfred up and I was like, oh, so this is a problem. I'm realizing my mom is always like telling me that I don't reach out enough or I'm not texting or anything. Like, what if there was an easy way she could always check that I was doing okay? Or, basically, and then he's like, oh, I have the same problem. I was like, huh, okay. And then we asked a few friends and all of them were like, oh, we have the same problem as well. So we were like, if I have this problem, you have this problem. Maybe many more people have this problem. And that was how the idea of Sitch was founded.
Yeah. And
as for the evolution, I think Myford can take that one.
Yeah, sorry. So as we started looking more into it, we realized that there was just larger problems stemming from what had evolved, how these apps evolved over the years. The early 2000s, the emergence of Web 2.0 spawning all these different social networking apps. Back then, it was, as we said, connection was their primary purpose. We were able to connect to people regardless of distance, and it was this great novel thing. But over the years, as they evolved, they started changing these algorithms, started putting content first, being addictive and shortening our attention span. So we noticed this downward trend of features, and it was hurting connections, and connections weren't even a secondary or tertiary feature. It like fell off their priority list. So we thought there's got to be a better way to do this. And yeah, that's what set us out to build it. And another important thing, a distinction because I'm sure a lot of you entrepreneurs are similar, you're going to have lots of ideas. You're going to have ideas, and the ideas are a dime a dozen. You're going to constantly be thinking of new things and how to do things differently. One way to know that you're on the right track with something is if you start losing sleep over it, if you can't think about it anymore. In fact, Daniyal and I had always wanted to go into business together. We talked about it back when we were at university. And in fact, we had even started a rough business plan and model for a different idea before Sitch came along. But after he called me and told me the original problem, we started ideating around Sitch. Neither of us could think about anything else. And that's when we shifted gears and knew this was the right direction for us.
Okay, great. So we have Mr. Sikandar. He's asked this question: how will this app sit with introverts?
Sorry, what was the last one?
How will this app sit with introverts?
Oh, introverts. Oh, fantastic. Well, that's a great question. I'm actually very introverted myself. As much as I love talking about Sitch and the idea too, like this is not my comfort space by any means. So this was very appealing to us. In fact, another way to do this is just build a product that you want to exist in the world. And part of your hypothesis that you're testing there is, oh, there's going to be other people like me. And that's exactly what we did here. So over these years, as this shift happened, I had noticed myself, and Daniyal as well, we started dropping off of various social media apps. We fell off Facebook first, and I fell off Snapchat, and I started using these less and less, and I was less of an active user. And if I was still on these apps, I was mostly just a viewer, only occasionally chiming in here and there and posting something. So that's due to just how they shifted their priority of where they put their features on and what their features were aiming to accomplish. That naturally happened because I think it got extrapolated since I am more introverted than most people. So having an app like this where it's private, there's only the people that I care about and the connections are mutual. I don't have to worry about who might be following me or if I'm following them. I know that it's a safe place of people that I would open up to naturally. And in fact, the added benefit for introverts, I would say, is that you don't actually have to ask anybody for help, or they don't have to ask you how you are. If you're opting this information in whenever you feel comfortable doing so, it's just there, and that's part of the beauty of it. There's no direct exchange that can sometimes lead to awkward scenarios, or whether you want to be super truthful or not. But by opting this in, especially in days where I'm not feeling great, but I don't want to necessarily ask for help, I might post a sitch that shows my slightly down feeling, and I already have people reaching out to me asking how they can help because they have the time to do so.
Right. Well put, my friend. And I would just like to add one more thing here. Actually, after the launch of Sitch, like I had an example where I have a friend who's very introverted, and he posted on Sitch saying that he had COVID and he had like a terrible mood. So I actually called him and reached out and asked how I could help. He's someone who never would have messaged people and told them that I'm feeling sick or I have COVID right now. But due to Sitch, he felt like it was a safe enough space where he could post this. And for that reason, like we could reach out and help out however we could.
Hmm, interesting. So, how did you come up with the name Sitch?
So Sitch was actually, originally we didn't want the name, and the branding can be actually a really fun thing to do with brands, with any new startup or idea. We had a placeholder because we couldn't think of the perfect name right away. So for a long time we called it just project status. It's just some kind of placeholder for us to continue working and name our folders and everything. Sitch was on the short list from ideas we had. It's a derivated from situation. So what's your situation? What's your sitch? We came up with a short list of ideas for names, and we actually just got feedback from people we care about. So people that we currently have on Sitch are pretty much the people that we polled and asked them to vote, and Sitch came out as #1. And then I think after saying it enough times, it stuck with us for a while. There might have been another one contending for first place, but we just decided to veto and choose Sitch above all.
Yeah, and it was a very fun few weeks because we had multiple rounds of polls and we were just going out and shortening the list. And a lot of our friends and participants were really like pushing for the name they chose to end up winning. So the ones who voted for Sitch were actually really excited about it, but some people aren't happy too. It was fun times.
Another reason that we favored Sitch as well was when you're looking into these names, it's a fair thing to do your due diligence and look at how it might do with SEO. Are there any competitors? Of course, you have to be able to trademark the name, look up for domains. We, in fact, had some struggles with domains. So when you're even like social handles, you have to do all this research too when you're making a short list of potential names, because there might be something that is so perfect for your company, but if someone else owns the rights, then you can't really do much about it.
Okay, so this one is interesting. With the increasing demand for visual content, how does Sitch cater to multimedia interactions while maintaining its focus on genuine connections?
So it's a tricky thing to navigate. We don't have any content, or we wouldn't call what Sitch does content by any means. In fact, there's no timeline or history of any Sitch that you post. That's why we say it's timely information. So you either saw someone's Sitch or you didn't, because once they replace it with something, or once it's been too old, it's no longer relevant, because it's how you're doing kind of that day. It's a fleeting bit of information. Content is something that we have to manage in a very delicate way, because we don't want to see ourselves fall into the same trap that a lot of other companies did. Facebook, in fact, if you actually maybe go back to this chart here, Facebook is very much leaning on media side here. But when they started, in fact, they were called the social network. So they were way on the right side, leaning networking principles. But over time, they put content more and more as their priority, and that's why they've shifted. So the introduction of content is important, because we also don't want to fall into a trap that BeReal sustained. BeReal came out with more networking principles, a more authentic version of something like Snapchat, but they didn't innovate too much after that. They kind of sticked with one gimmicky feature, and they stalled out and users started to leave. And recently they've been adding more and more features. They've had a resurgence of activity and new development. but they've kind of let go of their original core value and started introducing more features that just hook attention much more. So they're further pushing themselves closer toward Snapchat as well. So when we're considering new features to push out, we don't even want to compete with any other multimedia platforms. We see a world where we coexist with the likes of TikTok and Instagram. There's a world where you can use both. Social media has its purpose. The thing is, it's just shifting. It's no longer going to attempt at juggling connections and content. And there's nothing wrong with that. Social media is great, and all these different video format platforms are excellent for entertaining ourselves and for information gathering. But when it comes to fostering and deepening connections, we have to go to other apps to build communities. Sitch for the people closest to you, something like Discord for more and chats with people that have like-minded interests. So that's our approach to it.
Right, and I think that's a very important point that Majfred just made here, is that we intend to complement these apps, not replace them. Like, we don't consider them competitors because we're not trying to achieve the same goals. We're trying to complement them with what is missing and what used to be there in the original social networks, which is no longer there.
Okay. So this question, so I'll just extend that question also. So what's your vision for Switch in the future? And I would say future the two, let me just dig it down around 3 years. So where do you see this app going, moving forward 3 years from now?
Oh, excellent question. I feel like at this stage of the company, we're very near-term thinking, because you're working again without any external funding. You're always thinking of more pressing, more earlier things to come on your timeline. But 3 years from now, if we can reach our external funding goals as well, we've probably, giving traction of a typical app like this, have raised maybe a secondary fund or something like a Series A funding. And we have tens of millions, if not hundreds of millions of users, but basically Sitch has become a staple in people's lives. We've done the original goal of becoming this app that fills the void, as we described it, and people are using it to better and foster their connections. And Sitch in 3 years from now, hopefully, is also evolved based on all these users' feedback. And maybe even we've started competing with a couple different apps based on the features that we've introduced. But, and I can't stress this enough, I hope that we can stay true to our original mission of being this networking app and not catering to maybe overall demand for kind of more gimmicky media features. But I also love to see us partnering with other apps out there that have a similar mission in terms of bettering connections and bettering kind of mental health and all those things. So maybe we can also have some strategic partnerships aligned that offer new features in the app.
Okay, great. So are there any more questions in the chat window? Let me see. Yeah, so how will you make sure that you stick to the social networking side of things as you evolve and move towards content?
Yeah, so basically anytime we consider a new feature and we've got like a list of a long list of features, we always ask ourselves, like, where does this fall on the pole here on a line such as this? What would it do to the company? Does it violate our original principles, or can we bend it in a way that makes it work? It's just something we're constantly asking ourselves. And because we stress the point so much, we like to think that we have enough control and the willpower to say no to some kind of content features. But if it's in such heavy demand by a vast majority of our actual users, not just people voicing their opinions, but actual users are demanding something like, for example, a big request was, oh, I'd love to do more types of reactions, or maybe even in-app messaging. If it becomes such a heavy request from actual users, then it's our responsibility as a company to pivot, but we hope to be able to do something uniquely in our own way.
Anyone else? Any questions? Please write in the chat box. We're going to get it answered.
Right. I don't see a question, but I see a comment from Sikandar. And yes, mental health features are actually on the top of our list of features to be introduced. Mental health and wellness was one of the core principles that we had when we envisioned Sitch. So keep an eye out. We're going to have a lot of mental health features coming soon.
Okay. So I think we don't have any more questions. Yeah, so this was a wonderful session. Let me go towards the closing. Any closing remarks, both of you, before I close the session?
Just thank you for allowing us to take the time to tell you about Sitch. We hope that this insight into our journey has helped some of you find inspiration and maybe some ideas or just tips on improving yours as well. We hope if we had something like this, we would have been able to circumvent some of our mistakes. So hopefully you can learn from things we did and have your journey go a lot smoother. But yeah, thank you.
Yeah,
Yep,
so
thank you for having us. Yeah.
Most welcome. I think the kind of positioning of this app is a little different in a way that you're kind of finding a gap in the more genuine connections kind of focus. And I think it has a lot of potential, huge potential, and it's good to test new markets. And hopefully, I would also encourage all of my participants here from UCP to explore Sitch further. We have the download link in that email, and we will be sending you more information regarding that, how to download that app, or any kind of tutorials or any kind of help that you need. Both Daniyal and they would be here to answer those questions. I think. One of the most important things for me is that it's not about the quantity of connections. I think the thing that matters most is the quality of connections. I think with this app, I see that the quality of connections is there's a chance for it to improve a lot. So before we conclude, heartfelt thank you to all of you who joined the session. Thank you very much, Majfred and Daniyal, for taking the time out as early as in your time zone, and talking to my students and everyone here in this community. If you have any questions or any other information, please don't hesitate to reach us at Takhleeq. We will make sure to pass on all your queries to the founders, and we will definitely be pinging you again for a few sessions down the line. In 2-3 months time, we would want you guys to talk to the students and entrepreneurs here of UCP and everything. So I think once again, thank you very much for joining us. We wish you all a day filled with meaningful connections, and look forward to seeing you in the future webinars. Stay connected, stay authentic, and have a wonderful day. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. Bye.